my frame, am I like upright like a phone, or am I like, how do I look on your screen?
You're perfect.
Okay.
All
right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we're doing another indie horror spotlight. Today I have with me an indie filmmaker, director who has a new movie. It's in post-production, and it's called Waltz. I have with us today Joshua Melly. Joshua, how you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming to the Horror Room.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about Waltz.
All right. Well, Waltz is it's a psychological thriller. If I were giving you an elevator pitch, it would be Misery meets Psycho. It's about a girl who is, she's from England. She's loses her job and has to try and find some new way of making money. And she finds a site where she can make some money selling pictures of a particular nature, we'll say. And she ends up finding some success with that. But with that comes fans and internet fame and things of that nature. And she ends up getting into a little trouble with one of her with her biggest fan on the site, and ends up in a very uncomfortable position where she is abducted and tormented a little bit and having to kind of fight for her life to get out.
Sounds like an interesting thing, especially nowadays, since that's the way a lot of individuals are making extra income.
Yeah, it really is. It felt very relevant to the time to tell a story like that, and incorporate technology. Which I mean, as having a web show, it's great and it lets us do a lot, but it can also cause some issues as well. And they say the internet is forever, and it's kind of hard to escape your past sins when they're posted out there for everyone to see. So that factors into the story quite a bit too.
And the crazy thing about it, so you were talking about something. It's a real thing because I used to work in corporate America, and most people don't know there was a lot of individuals who were terminated because they would do a web sweep, and they would find some of the employees OnlyFans or backstage or not back page profiles, and that was considered breaking company rules and policies, and they were terminated for that.
Yeah. I was in corporate IT myself for quite a few years. Actually, it was where I kind of got my start before I shifted into what I'm doing now. And even back then, I mean, when I first started, it wasn't anything quite so horrific as something like OnlyFans, but it was like Napster. People would use their company laptop or their company desktop to download MP3s illegally and stuff back then. So yeah, it's that kind of thing's always been with us and always been a problem. But sites like OnlyFans definitely add a unique complication to it because you tend to get a little bit more variety of fans that visit pages like that. And I'm not judging or saying that there's necessarily anything wrong with it. I actually have a good friend of mine who does very well as a model on her OnlyFans page. So it's definitely a legitimate avenue, but there are always extreme elements, and that can get a little crazy.
Because almost like in your movie, you can find out the wrong fan, and now you're in a bad situation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So production-wise, so the movie's in post-production right now. How long has it taken you, beginning to end, to write the script, come up with the concept, and actually get to the point where you're in post-production?
Well, I started working on it. Really, Waltz. I did a short film version of it back in 2016. It was about like 25 minutes long. Slightly different concept, but the idea was the same. A young lady gets kidnapped and tormented at the hands of somebody who was kind of obsessed with her. And so really it's been since then. We had some reshoots and things that we never got to do. We lost the location. The lead actress moved away, so that one kind of fell to bits at the end. My wife, God love her, she had always enjoyed that story, and she wanted me to try and still make it happen. So when the time came and I had the opportunity to do a feature, She says, "Oh, you should do Waltz. You should rewrite Waltz and make it, relevant for right now." And so that was in 2021. I wrote the script just over the summer. It took maybe 2.5 months because I'd already done the shorts. I had a pretty good idea of how it was going to go. We did casting throughout July and into August. And then right at the beginning of August, once we had the majority of everything in place, we were able to start shooting. Most of it takes place. We had a local haunted attraction where I live, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh. There's a place called Freddy's Haunts, which is just insanely popular around here. And we happen to have some connections with the guys that run it, so they let us film in that and let us build a whole set for the crazed fan, the Hatter. We call the character. So that took us, we shot until the end of September. So about 2 months roughly production. I think within the 2 months we shot for maybe 18 days. It was a 90-page script, so it wasn't very long. And then post-production was a bit more complicated because, when you're working at an indie level and you're really literally just doing this on your own steam, Waltz was self-financed. Like I put my own money out to make it. So we had an editor, things didn't quite work out. So then I did a cut. And then we had somebody else come in, somebody who I'd worked with before, whose availability was freed up since we had started post. And she currently has it and is putting on the finishing touches. And I'm very pleased with how that's gone. She's trimmed out some of the bloats, and it's pretty fast paced and exciting. So all told, it's been like 2 years from start to finish so far.
Now, did you find any real life scenarios or stories that you got some inspiration for Waltz?
Not specifically for this. I did have. It's funny because it's the original version of the script from back in 2016. The girl who played my lead back then actually had some personal experience with. It wasn't an internet fan, but it was definitely somebody who was a little creepy and making some unfortunate advances, and so that was not an ideal situation. But I borrowed a little bit of the, we'll say, emotional truth from her experience and put that into Waltz. Because I mean, me as a guy, and what's more, as a bald middle-aged guy, I don't have a lot of stalkers banging down my door. So it's hard to really, put yourself in that kind of situation. So I'm thankful to her for letting me kind of tap into that emotional journey and channel a bit of it into the script for this, because I think it added some authenticity, understanding, where she's coming from, what it's like to be in that situation, which is horribly unpleasant, as you might imagine.
Now, as a man who I'm assuming never stalked anybody, but I've never stalked anybody. I wouldn't say it if I did, but I didn't. Listen, but like, how do you get yourself into the mindset of, okay, so you have an actress who can give kind of that side. When it comes to the male actor, where do you get your inspiration from of what a stalker is going to act like? Where does that initiative from a stalker even comes from?
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. For the Hatter, in this case, their motivation in this, it comes from a place of what they believe to be genuine affection for this person. I've never stalked anybody personally. I have loved people, obviously. I mean, I have a wife. I love her very much. And sometimes when you get into that mode where you desperately care about somebody, you want to see them, do things to improve themselves or to try and be better than what they are. And so for our Hatter, that would appear to be the motivation. It's trying to get our main character, Alice, to see, hey, I'm crazy about you, but this stuff you're doing is awful and you need to stop. So, they say, it's a little bit of a cliche, but they say every villain is the hero of their own story. And so in kind of a twisted way, the Hatter thinks they're doing something good, and if they have to do something immoral for that positive result to be achieved, then they're okay with that. They're taking the hit, and in a way, it's almost self-sacrificial from their point of view, you know. Um, so it's a twisted logic, but it's there.
Was there any point during filming where you were like, "Oh, this is getting a little too dark, or this is getting a little too uncomfortable"?
There were a number of scenes, and there's nothing super explicit in this, as far as it doesn't get graphic or sexually uncomfortable or anything like that. But the emotional intensity between our leads got very, very intense a couple of times. I made them, I tormented them a little bit. Usually, when you make a film and you're doing your close-ups, you'll do a couple of lines and then cut, and then a couple of lines and then cut. But some of the scenes where the Hatter is kind of torturing Alice, we just did it all in one very, very long take. And we take breathers here and there, but we would never stop rolling. And that really increased the pressure on our leads to, it was a lot more lines to remember. So it was very stressful on them a little bit. And they were okay with this. I sat down before we shot it and said, "Hey, I'd like to try and do this. What do you think?" And they were both, very much in favor of giving it a shot. Not after 3 or 4 days, but, at first. And so, yeah, there was definitely some very intense moments there that really came out. And both of them actually, during the climax of the film, the Hatter actually, that actor had to kind of take a minute and just kind of walk away, because there's some very intense stuff that happens during the climax that they had to kind of walk out and take a break and kind of collect themselves just to come back and do it again. So it was tough. It was stressful, but 2 years on now, I talked to them both, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it was amazing. We really enjoyed making that." And seeing now, they've seen some of the rough cuts. I did kind of a rough cut of the ending, and everybody's really, really excited. So,
now, did they stay
those
from each other on set when they weren't filming to build up that tension?
Not always. Oftentimes, Alice was kind of isolated because she had a lot of makeup to get into. As the Hatter tortures Alice, there are a number of things that happen to her physically. So as the film wore on, as we were doing those scenes, her time in the makeup chair gradually increased. And so she was kind of off by herself anyway, just talking to our special effects wizard, Jason Proakis from Morgor Effects. He did all the prosthetics and things. So they were separated in that sense, but I didn't ask them to stay apart. And in fact, like I said, because some of the nature of some of the scenes, if they needed that break and that levity, I really didn't mind, just so they could come down a little bit from the darkness. We were shooting overnight. It was very, very hot. It was in the middle of summer, and Freddy's Haunt is basically a big wooden box with a metal roof. So even at nighttime, it was like 95, 100 degrees in there. So anything to make it more bearable.
I definitely worked in one of those before in the heat, and one of those old haunts, and it is tough, especially if you're moving around and being physical and active. Oh, it's hell, literally.
Oh yeah.
So, all right, I have a 2-part question for you.
Sure.
All right. So you're in post-production right now.
Mm-hmm.
What is 2-part question? The first question is, what is one thing that you learned from making this movie that you were like, that worked, I'm going to carry on to my next film? Second part is, what's one thing that you were like, oh shit, I would never do that again in my next movie?
I think the way that I approached how we kind of blocked out the scenes and set up the scenes with Alice and the Hatter, I just kind of sat there and let them do what felt natural to them, and kind of planned, the scene blocking around that, because they were very zeroed in on the characters at that point. I've done I've done some films before. I've done some short films and things in the past. This was my first feature, but generally it's like, okay, we're going to stand here and do this. And when I saw how zeroed in these two were on their characters, I thought, okay, I'm going to let them kind of dictate maybe a little bit how this is going to go. And it worked really well. The blocking for the scenes it was very, very natural. There are a couple scenes where Alice is kind of tied to a chair, and the Hatter is kind of going around torturing her a little bit. And that can be awkward to try and do cinematically. But the way that they opted to kind of move around and play off of each other, it worked really well. So listen to your actors. That's, probably my biggest positive takeaway from that. When you've got the right people in the right roles, they can intuit how things should be. And, there are times where I'd step in and let's try it this way or something like that. But for a lot of those scenes, especially, I just kind of let them go, and we got some good stuff from it. As far as what didn't work or what I wouldn't do again, a lot of that came down to scheduling. We had some unique challenges working in that haunted attraction because about 50% of it didn't have power. So that meant we had to run a lot of singers, extension cords, throughout like the deeper recesses of the haunt. We had kind of this big main area near the entrance that had power, and that was where the Hatter's lair was. But there was a prison cell and a cemetery and some other cool things deeper inside that we wanted to use. And it was a challenge with the number of crew members that we had to get everything lit quickly and get through the material for the night. We ended up staying there. I think we were back 3 times more than we wanted to be. I had like 12 days planned there, and we ended up at like 15 days. So better awareness of the location and making sure that we have electricity everywhere and things like that. That was a learning experience. So I'll be more aware of that on the next one, should something like that come up.
I hear from a lot of indie filmmakers how important location is. Like your knowledge of location, the accessibility of the location, and even the environment the location's in is so important.
It is. There's a lot of things that you don't even consider it. This haunt is basically a shack, a huge shack in the woods on this guy's property. And it's out in the middle of nowhere where you would think, okay, there's not going to be a lot of ambient noise, but the forest around that place is about as noisy as downtown Pittsburgh, as far as the animals and the wind and things hitting the ceiling. I don't even know what they were. I think they were like those little helicopters, the seeds that flutter down. It sounded like we were being bombarded a couple of nights there. It was bam, bam, bam. And there's an airport not far, so a lot of the stuff that we had to shoot outside the haunt, which is basically the climax of the film. We were hold for airplane, hold for airplane, hold for airplane. There was a lot of planes.
Because as a movie watcher, I would never think that location could be something that's stressful to the everyday watcher.
Yeah,
think about.
It is, yeah, and that's something the folks that were with us. A couple of my kids helped out. I have 5 kids, and I had something like 2 or 3 of them on set most of the time with us. Also, my effects guy Jason brought his daughter along. So for some of them, it was the first time ever being on the set. And they even come to me, a year later, 2 years later. I still can't believe it. That's how, I find myself every time I watch a movie, I think, oh, how many takes did that, did it take them to get through that scene? Or, how many angles did they shoot that scene at? Like, they're aware of the process of filmmaking as they're watching movies now. And so they kind of come to me and they're like, I don't know if I like that or not because I can't turn it off, wondering about these behind the scenes details. So that's something that happens, I guess.
All right, Joshua, we'll get to the fun part of the interview. I'm going to ask you 2 random horror questions since this is a horror channel. Okay? All right.
Yeah.
What horror movie director do you say that you get most of your inspiration from? when it comes to filmmaking?
I really love the slow burn stuff. So it definitely, Waltz especially was very much inspired by Alfred Hitchcock. Um, I know he's probably a lot of people's go-to for questions like that, but he is the way that he built up suspense and character at the same time, which is something you don't see too much of in modern horror. You get a lot of jump scares and you get caricatures, but like deep character connections is something that he did really well in the slow burn. So
in his movies, you got to know the
yeah,
character, you got to see them, and you got to kind of, you know what I mean, kind of engage with them, and you kind of care about, you
exactly.
know, like the victim's outcome. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
agree.
And that's where when I initially said that, you know, the elevator pitch would be Misery and Misery meets Psycho. You know, it took like a half an hour of story and character development to get to know Janet Leigh's character and her situation and follow her as, you know, she steals the car and takes the or buys the new car, takes the money, and ends up at the base motel. Like you spend a lot of time investing in her character. And yeah, that's what I like. I like being engaged like that. So yeah, that was definitely a big influence on me.
And the second one I'm going to ask you is, all right, I'm going to ask you a fun one. So if someone would give you $100,000 to add to your budget to Waltz, what's one thing that you would add it that you would love to add to the movie that you would add?
I would have done a little bit more with the location that we were at. Um, there's 2 points where Alice tries to make an escape from the Hatter's lair. And both of those, we were kind of limited with what we could do, and all in terms of time because it took so long to set the lights up. And then also by the fact that the power was out in half of the haunt. That haunt is amazing. There's so many cool scenes that I would have loved to have, you know, put Alice into as she's trying to get away from her captor. And so I absolutely would have loved to have done that. Um, just enhance things a bit, added some more scenes in the haunt.
By the way, I'm a huge haunted house fan, and you're promoting the hell out of this haunted house, so I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah, it's one of the good ones. It's a lot of the ones near the city. You know, they're bigger. They have a couple more actors. They also cost twice as much to get into. So this place is far enough away where it's like you can get like an express pass for like $20 or something like that, where you don't have to wait in line. They also have out in their yard. They have a big bonfire every night. They have bands that come and play. So even the wait to get in is awesome. Like it's like a big freaking Halloween party. We actually, Grim Sleeper Productions, my production company, we actually set up there the year that we filmed Waltz, and we had a booth and we had like clips from the movie that I already had done that we shot inside. And it's kind of like, oh, come see what we shot, and then see if you can find the location whenever you're going through the haunt, kind of thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Okay. And give them another plug, by the way. I said it's called Freddy's. What's it called?
Freddy's Haunts.
Freddy's Haunts. Okay, and that's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Beaver County, actually. It's in Aliquippa is the name of the city that it's in, or the name of the town that it's in. So yeah, Aliquippa, PA, Freddy's Haunts. Nothing to do with Freddy Krueger. It's just the guy that owns it. But it's a convenient name.
My mind went straight to Freddy Krueger. All right, Joshua, where can everyone find you?
We are on the web at grimsleeperproductions.com. You can find us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Waltz the movie. You can also find me on Instagram and most other places, Storyteller JDM. So Instagram.com/Storyteller JDM, Facebook.com/Storyteller JDM. So there's a number of places. If you just search for us there, you'll definitely find us.
Sounds good. Now, Joshua, when Waltz finally comes out, please let me know. I would love to watch it and then have you back on and talk about it.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be awesome.
Well, it was a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for coming on to the Horror Room.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. It was a good time.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.